Ravel Thorn wiped his hands on a rag as sparks flew from the broken engine in front of him. The shipyard was quiet, too quiet for a place at the edge of human space. Most ships had long gone, leaving only old hulls and scattered tools. Ravel liked it this way. He preferred the silence, the smell of oil, and the hum of machines. It was simpler than dealing with people. That night, a storm of solar winds rattled the windows. The usual alarms that warned of intruders failed to sound. Ravel muttered under his breath as he tightened a bolt, unaware that he was being watched. From the darkness of the yard, two tiny shapes moved slowly, dragging themselves over the metal floor. They were small, no bigger than a large dog, but their scales glinted faintly in the dim lights. Their wings were torn, their claws scratched, and their eyes wide with fear. Ravel froze as he noticed them hiding under the edge of a bench. He knew almost instantly what they were. Dragons. He had heard rumors, old stories passed down in human colonies. Dragons once ruled parts of the galaxy, and their young were hunted by imperial forces after the Great Wars. It was illegal to shelter them, and most people would have reported them immediately, or worse. But Ravel did not move. He crouched low and watched. The smaller one whimpered softly, a sound that made him pause. Its wing twitched as if it wanted to move but could not. The other, slightly bigger, hissed quietly and pressed itself closer to the wall. Ravel felt something stir inside him, a kind of recognition that he had not felt in years. These creatures were terrified, yes, but they were not enemies. They were children. He crept over slowly, careful not to scare them further. He carried a tray of leftover rations from his evening meal, dried protein cubes and some fresh water he had distilled from the shipyard's filters. "It's okay," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "You won't get hurt here." The smaller dragon took a hesitant step forward, sniffing at the tray. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Ravel smiled faintly, relieved. The bigger one stayed back, eyes fixed on the door, ears twitching at every sound. He understood their caution. Patrol ships often passed through this sector, scanning for illegal life forms, especially dragons. One wrong move and they could all be destroyed. Ravel moved quickly but gently. He tore a piece of metal from a broken panel and began shaping it with his tools. "This will help your wing," he said, pressing the brace carefully along the torn membrane. The dragon flinched, but Ravel kept talking, explaining each movement as if it could understand every word. Slowly it stopped trembling. He worked on the other one next, using scrap wire to hold a delicate membrane together. By the time he finished, the two dragons were still, but their breathing had steadied. Days passed. Ravel fed them in secret, hiding them under benches and in storage rooms when the patrols flew too close. He named the smaller one Mira and the larger Kess. Mira was curious, touching everything with tiny claws and trying to flap her damaged wings. Kess was cautious, watching the skies and listening to every distant hum of engines. They learned quickly. Ravel was amazed at how intelligent they were. They understood the sound of the alarm he kept broken and how to stay silent when danger approached. He repaired old tools and gave them small mechanical puzzles to solve. Mira would poke at gears and levers, learning the way machines moved. Kess preferred to watch and learn by observing, always studying, always cautious. Ravel had never seen anything like it. Humans learned from books or machines, but dragons learned from trust. They were small, fragile, and yet, somehow, stronger in spirit than most humans he knew. One night, Ravel sat on the floor, letting Mira crawl over his lap while Kess curled at his side. The storm outside had grown stronger, making the walls shake. He looked up at the sky through the cracked roof of the workshop. Lights flashed far above. The patrol ships, no doubt, scanning for movement. His heart thumped, but he refused to panic. He had survived this long and so had they. Then a voice came from the old comm system, cutting through the hum of his tools and the rain outside. Imperial broadcast. All missing dragon heirs must be found at any cost. Any human sheltering such creatures will be treated as enemy of the state. The message repeated itself in a loop. Ravel's stomach tightened. He had known the risk, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Mira pressed her small head into his chest, sensing his unease. Kess let out a low rumble, protective and wary. Ravel looked down at them, and a strange determination settled in his chest. He would not give them up. Not now. Not ever. The night seemed to stretch on forever, with the rain tapping against the metal roof and distant patrols echoing like ghost ships. Ravel checked the braces on their wings again, made sure the food was hidden, and whispered, "We'll be fine. We always are." Mira blinked at him, and Kess let out a small, trusting growl. For the first time he allowed himself to hope. In the darkest hours, with two fragile lives depending on him, Ravel understood something he had never realized before. Courage was not in fighting alone or having power. Courage was in protecting what was small, weak and scared, even when no one else would. He had chosen to feed 2 hungry little refugees, and that choice, he felt deep in his bones, would echo farther than any patrol ship, farther than any empire. The night passed slowly, but Revel did not sleep. He sat between them, feeling the tiny warmth of their bodies against the cold metal floor. Outside, the stars glittered, and somewhere he knew the galaxy was watching. It had no idea yet how 1 human and 2 little dragons could change everything. And in that quiet workshop at the edge of human space, a mechanic, 2 dragons, and a secret grew stronger together. No alarm, no patrol, no empire could break what had begun that night. 5 years passed in the quiet edges of the star system. Revel Thorn had grown used to the routine of his workshop, but he never grew tired of the little dragons he had saved. Kess and Mira had grown from fragile hatchlings into creatures nearly as large as a small ship's cockpit. Their wings, once torn and weak, now stretched wide and strong, though Revel had kept the metal braces in place as a reminder of the first night he met them. Revel never taught them to fight. Instead, he taught them patience, kindness, and how to use tools. He showed Mira how to adjust a fuel injector and Kess how to repair a small shield generator. They learned quickly, their sharp eyes noticing every detail. He was amazed at their intelligence. Humans often struggled to see the simplest connections, but dragons saw patterns, gears, and sequences like a second nature. Every morning, the dragons helped him clean the yard and fix old ships abandoned by traders. By afternoon, they carried supplies to the poorest refugees living in small pods near the station. Mira loved flying above the narrow corridors, delivering food and water, while Kess often stayed grounded, lifting heavy crates that no human could move alone. The refugees whispered stories about the dragons. They helped those who cannot help themselves, some said. Others were afraid. Monsters are dangerous, they warned, though they had never seen the dragons close enough to be harmed. Revel did not care what rumors spread. He had chosen to care for them and they had chosen to care for him. Their bond was quiet but strong, a friendship that no patrol ship could detect. Still, whispers traveled faster than metal hulls in space. Some travelers told tales of a human who tamed monsters, a mechanic who lived on the edge of the galaxy and worked with dragons as if they were ordinary pets. Traders passing through often glanced at the workshop with suspicion. Occasionally, a patrol ship would slow down and scan the area, though none had ever landed. Revel ignored the attention. Life had been hard before he found Kess and Mira, and life had been harder after. But now each day felt purposeful. He could fix the broken engines of ships and the broken lives of those who had nowhere else to go. The dragons were not weapons but helpers. They did not breathe fire to destroy, but to heat water and keep warm the poor who had no other way to survive. One quiet evening, Revel worked on a transmission array while Mira and Kess sat nearby, watching with interest. The stars outside were bright, silent, and endless. Kess tilted her head as the array hummed, sensing vibrations in the metal. Mira crawled over a wire coil and twitched her tail. Suddenly, a low vibration pulsed from deep inside the dragons' bodies. It was faint at first, almost like a heartbeat in metal, but it grew stronger. Revel paused, placing a hand on Kess's shoulder. "What is it?" he asked, though he had no answer. The dragons stiffened. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, amber and gold reflecting the starlight. Mira hissed softly, a sound of warning, while Kess lowered her head, listening. Revel watched in awe as something inside them shifted. The dragons began to tremble slightly, as if remembering something long forgotten. Ravel's old sensors, the ones he had cobbled together to monitor the workshop, began to pick up unusual readings. The air vibrated with energy, faint and rhythmic, like a message hidden in sound waves. He checked the readings over and over, but he could not decipher them. The signal was not human, not even fully alive. It was something ancient. Something that had waited a long time to awaken. Mira tilted her head, and a soft hum escaped her throat. The vibration pulsed through the floor of the workshop. Kess's wings stretched, and the glow in her eyes deepened. The dragons were not just children, they were carriers of a legacy Revel had never known. They were tied to a royal bloodline, one that had been destroyed decades ago in the wars that had scattered dragons across the galaxy. These were not ordinary refugees, they were heirs. Revel felt a chill run down his spine. All the training, all the care, all the quiet years of teaching them tools and kindness had prepared them for this moment, even if he did not yet understand it. The dragons had grown strong, yes, but something far larger had been growing inside them, something that waited for the right time to signal the universe. The sensors began to pick up a stronger pattern. The hum turned into a pulse. It left the workshop carrying a message through the stars. Somewhere, in the far reaches of the galaxy, beings would feel it. Some would be curious, some would be afraid. And some, like the imperial forces that had hunted dragons for decades, would move quickly to respond. Ravel crouched between the dragons, placing a hand on each of them. Mira nuzzled his palm, and Kess rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "I don't know what's happening," he whispered, "but we will face it together." The dragons responded with soft growls and clicks, sounds that seemed to promise trust, loyalty, and courage. That night, for the first time in 5 years, Ravel looked at the sky and wondered if his small acts of kindness had consequences far beyond what he could see. He had fed 2 hungry little dragons, sheltered them, and taught them patience instead of fear. Now, the galaxy itself was waking up to their existence, and perhaps, in some quiet way, it was beginning to watch him too. The workshop felt alive in a way it never had before. Tools hummed, metal groaned, and the dragon's small breaths filled the space with warmth. Ravel knew that nothing would be the same again. The calm years of secret care were ending. Soon, the world, or the galaxy, would know that dragons lived, and that one human had helped them survive. As the last lights of the distant patrol ships blinked against the stars, a pulse of energy left the dragons' bodies, sending a signal across space. Somewhere, far away, someone or something would notice. Ravel held his breath, waiting, hoping that the choice he had made so long ago, to feed, to protect, to care, would not bring only danger, but also a chance to show that humans could be more than conquerors. They could be guardians. The stars shone above, endless and silent. But now, thanks to 2 dragons and 1 human, they were no longer completely quiet. The signal pulsed through space like a silent alarm. Far beyond the human settlements, it reached the dragon Empress, ruler of the galaxy's oldest dragon line. She sat upon a throne of crystalline light, her eyes narrowing as the readings from her deep space monitors lit up. Something or someone had awakened a power thought lost. Her elite guard, known as the Star Talons, were called at once. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were chosen for their speed, skill, and loyalty. They did not question orders. They executed them without hesitation. "Find the source," the Empress commanded, "and do not fail. Whoever dares to hide our heirs must answer for it." Thousands of kilometers away, Ravel Thorn was still in his workshop, unaware that he had become the target of one of the galaxy's most powerful rulers. He noticed the faint vibrations in the air first. Myra's wings twitched nervously, and Kess's eyes glowed in the dim light. They had felt it too, a distant energy moving closer, and it was not gentle. Ravel's stomach tightened. He knew patrols sometimes passed through this sector, but the feeling now was different. It was deliberate. It was searching. And it was coming for him. He glanced at the small dragons. "We might need to leave," he whispered. Mira pressed her head against his chest, a soft click of refusal. Kess rumbled low in her throat. Ravel looked at them in surprise. "You don't want to run?" he asked. They shook their heads. In unspoken ways, they told him they were not afraid to face what was coming, and they trusted him to do the same. It was then that they spoke, their voices not loud but clear in his mind. Humans could not always understand dragon speech, but the bond Ravel had built allowed this connection. "We are heirs," Kess said. "We survived the purge. We are not just refugees." Mira added softly, "You are the first who treated us as children, not weapons. You gave us life and choice." Ravel's heart ached. He had raised them in secret, taught them kindness, and yet he had never known their full importance. He looked at their glowing eyes and felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Not just for them but for something far larger, the future of dragonkind itself. Outside the workshop, lights appeared in the dark corridors of the station. Warships, sleek and black, moved into formation. Refugees scurried, hiding in narrow passages and small compartments. They had heard rumors of the Star Talons, feared stories of humans taken or killed for hiding dragons. Now they saw the ships with their own eyes, and panic spread like fire. Ravel moved quickly, checking the exits and securing the small dragons. "We can leave if we have to," he said, "but maybe we don't need to." Myra's tail flicked against his arm. Kess pressed her nose to his shoulder. They would not abandon the people who had become their friends. They would not run from their own destiny. The warships landed with a thunderous boom that shook the station. Ravel could hear the hiss of energy doors and the sharp clatter of boots on metal floors. The Star Talons had arrived, their armor glinting under the dim lights. Each one carried weapons designed to pierce scales, devices built to subdue dragons without killing them. They surrounded the workshop with careful precision, closing off every escape route. Ravel stepped forward. Mira and Kes stood behind him, their wings partially extended, creating shadows that stretched across the walls. The Star Talons stopped at the threshold, weapons raised, eyes scanning for any sudden move. Silence filled the air, heavy and tense. One of the guards, a tall figure with silver scales on his armor, spoke. "Step aside, human. These creatures belong to the Empress. Surrender them or face the consequences." His voice was firm, trained and cold, but Ravel did not flinch. He felt the fear in his chest, but it was buried under a stronger feeling, loyalty. "I will not surrender them," Ravel said simply. "They are not property. They are alive. And they are my friends." The Star Talons shifted, unsure. They had never seen a human display such courage, not in the presence of dragons and not before the Empress's wrath. But Ravel's eyes did not waver. He did not speak of power or escape. He only stood, small and human, between the dragons and the soldiers. Mira clicked softly and Kessa's eyes glowed brighter. It was as if they were saying, "We will stand with you." The Star Talons sensed it, felt the aura of loyalty and love between human and dragons. They had been trained to hunt dragons without hesitation, but these were not ordinary dragons. They were heirs. And the human who protected them was unlike any other they had faced. Minutes stretched. The silence was deafening. The refugees outside the workshop peered from hiding places, holding their breath. No one knew what would happen next. Would the guards attack? Would the dragons fight? Or would the human give up and save himself? Ravel's hands tightened into fists. He did not speak again. He did not flinch. Every beat of his heart told him he was ready to die for these creatures, as he had chosen to protect them from the very beginning. Behind him, Mira and Kes mirrored his stance, calm but prepared. Together they were a wall no one could easily break. The Star Talons hesitated. Their training demanded action, but their instincts warned them to pause. The dragons had power, yes, but it was tempered with trust, with love. The human in front of them had no weapons, no armor, and yet he radiated something stronger than fear. He radiated choice, courage, and loyalty. Time seemed to freeze. Warships hummed in the background. Refugees pressed against walls, eyes wide. The Star Talons leader lifted his hand as if giving the signal to strike, but something in his mind made him stop. Ravel stood, unwavering, a single human among dragons and soldiers. The air held its breath. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. The galaxy outside waited as if watching the moment before a storm. And in that pause, in that quiet before judgment, Ravel understood something he had known all along. Courage was not about winning. Courage was about standing for what is right, even when the entire galaxy might be against you. The tension in the workshop was unbearable. The Star Talons' weapons were trained on Ravel and the dragons, ready to strike at the first wrong movement. Outside, the refugees pressed against walls, holding their breath. Ravel stood in the middle, his hands unclenched, his chest steady. He could feel Mira and Kes behind him, wings slightly extended, tails brushing the floor. They waited, not with fear but with patience. Then, something incredible happened. Kes stepped forward. Her scales shimmered under the dim light, eyes glowing with quiet authority. Mira followed, small but confident, her head held high. The dragons did not roar. They did not attack. They spoke. "Ravel Thorn is our guardian," Kes said. Her voice was deep, calm and clear. "Not because the law commands it. Not because the galaxy says so. But because we choose it." Myra's smaller voice added, "He fed us when we were starving. He healed us when we were broken. He taught us patience, kindness and courage. We are alive because of him." The Star Talons froze. Their weapons wavered slightly as they processed what the dragons had said. They had been trained to obey without question, to take dragons as property for the Empress or to eliminate threats. But these were not ordinary dragons. Their words carried truth, and their loyalty radiated outward like an invisible shield. Ravel felt a lump in his throat. He had never imagined the dragons could speak in front of the Star Talons, let alone claim him as their guardian. His mind raced. If the guards hesitated, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to save them all. The hum of engines announced a new arrival. A ship descended slowly through the station's atmosphere, moving with deliberate power. The Empress herself had come. Her presence filled the air, an aura of authority and ancient wisdom. Her eyes scanned the workshop, expecting to find fear and defiance. Instead she found loyalty. Not the loyalty demanded by law, not the loyalty born of fear, but the loyalty of choice. Myra's eyes met hers, bright and unafraid. Kes bowed her head slightly, acknowledging her ruler but standing firm by Ravel's side. And Ravel himself, small and human, looked back at the Empress without trembling. The Empress's voice echoed in the workshop, calm but commanding. You have dared to hide my heirs, human. Why should I not punish you? Revel did not kneel. He did not plead. He spoke simply. Because I did not hide them to gain power. I did not raise them to serve anyone but themselves. I fed them, I healed them, and I gave them choice. I asked for nothing in return. Let them decide their own future. The Empress studied him, her sharp eyes piercing through the dim light and the hum of tension. Around her, the star talons stiffened, waiting for her command. Some expected her to order him executed. Others expected her to claim the dragons and punish the human for his disobedience. Then she tested him. With a single gesture, she offered Revel the chance to rule beside her, to gain power beyond anything a human could imagine. Accept, and you will have authority over dragons, over planets, over fleets. Refuse, and your life remains yours, but the choice will not come again. Ravel's chest rose and fell. He looked at Mira and Kess, their wings slightly brushing against his arms. He felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on him. Yet he smiled softly. No, he said. I will not take power. I do not want it. I only want them to be free. That is all. The Empress's eyes widened slightly. She had expected fear, ambition, hesitation, but not honesty, not loyalty, not courage in such a simple form. The star talons lowered their weapons slowly, uncertainty in their movements. The truth in the dragon's words and in Ravel's refusal had shifted the balance of the room. Kess stepped even closer to Revel, her warm, scaled body brushing against him protectively. Mira nuzzled his arm. They had chosen him and he had chosen them, not for power, not for law, but for life and trust. The Empress felt it too, the unspoken bond that could not be broken by edicts, weapons, or fear. For a long moment, silence filled the workshop. The storm outside had quieted, the hum of machinery softened, and even the refugees seemed to sense the pause. Everything waited for the next word, for the verdict that could bring either death or freedom. Finally the Empress spoke. Her voice was softer now, tinged with curiosity rather than anger. You ask only for their freedom, she said. You seek nothing else. Revel nodded. Yes. I only ask that they choose their own path. That is what matters. The Empress studied him, then glanced at the dragons. Their golden eyes met hers with a quiet intensity, unwavering loyalty, and deep wisdom. The ancient ruler could see what the star talons could not, that the human had shaped them not through fear or force, but through care, respect, and choice. She gave a slow nod, her hands folding in front of her. Then so it shall be, for now. They may choose and their guardian will remain by their side. But know this, human, the galaxy watches. Your choices will have consequences. Revel felt a wave of relief, but he did not celebrate. He remained by the dragon's side, small and human, yet stronger than many rulers. Mira and Kess curled around him slightly, as if sensing that the danger had passed, at least for the moment. The star talon stepped back, still tense but silent. The Empress's arrival had tested them all, and the lesson was clear. Power could command, but loyalty could protect. And Revel, a single human, had shown that courage and choice could outweigh any command, any law, or any empire. Revel looked at the dragons, their faces calm and trusting. He whispered softly, We'll face whatever comes next together. Kess rumbled in agreement. Mira flicked her tail, bright eyes shining. In that quiet workshop at the edge of human space, the galaxy's rulers learned a new truth. Courage is not in ruling or taking but in protecting and choosing wisely. Revel had refused power, yet in doing so, he had shown more strength than any throne or fleet could measure. And for the first time in years, Revel felt at peace. After the events at the workshop, the galaxy began to change. The Empress herself issued a new decree. Humans were no longer forbidden from protecting dragons. Laws that had lasted for centuries were rewritten. For the first time, kindness and care became as important as power and strength. Revel Thorn's actions, quiet, unassuming, and full of courage, had shifted the balance of the galaxy without a single battle. The star talons returned to their posts, still wary, but carrying new respect in their hearts. They whispered stories of a human who had stood between dragon heirs and an entire army, not with weapons but with love, trust, and loyalty. Kess and Mira, now acknowledged as rightful heirs to the dragon line, had begun their journey back to the larger dragon society. Their scales shimmered even brighter now, a reflection of their new status and the freedom they had been granted. Revel was offered titles, honors, and positions of influence. He could have had a palace built on any world, command fleets, and hold power over dragons as high as the Empress herself. But he shook his head. "I do not want any of that," he said. His heart had never been in ruling. The workbench, the smell of oil, the quiet hum of the shipyard, that was home. His satisfaction came from helping others, not sitting on a throne. Instead, Ravel accepted a simpler title, Guardian of Free Flame. It was symbolic, a recognition of the fact that he had protected the dragons by choice and had taught the galaxy an important lesson. The title was official, but it did not come with power or wealth. It came with respect, and that was enough for him. He returned to his workshop, to the broken hulls of ships and the scattered scraps of metal that had always felt like friends. Kess and Mira visited often. They landed beside his scrap piles as if they were small hatchlings again, chirping and nudging him to join in some small task or joke. Sometimes they carried gifts from the Dragon Society, shards of crystal, rare metals, or strange plants from distant planets, but they never demanded anything. They had their place among their own kind now, but they returned to him because he had been the first to care for them, the first to see them as more than tools of war or heirs to a throne. The refugees who had once watched in fear now came to thank him. They no longer whispered about monsters or humans who could be dangerous. Instead, they spoke of courage and care. Ravel continued to repair ships, share his knowledge, and quietly teach those who needed it. Word of his deeds spread slowly at first, then faster as travelers carried the stories to distant worlds. Across the galaxy, stories spread, but not of a human who conquered dragons or wielded power. They were stories of a human who fed 2 hungry children, cared for them in secret, and changed an empire without ever raising a weapon. People repeated the tales, and the lesson became clear. Humans were dangerous not because of strength or armies, but because of responsibility, compassion, and the courage to act alone when it mattered most. Some dragons, curious about the human who had saved their heirs, came to the edge of the station. They observed quietly, often from a distance, marveling at how small a human could be and yet how much influence he held. They saw the way he worked, unassuming but steady, and they realized that power did not always come from size, claws, or fire. Power could come from choice, loyalty, and the courage to protect what was vulnerable. Ravel never sought fame, but fame found him anyway. Young humans and dragons alike would come to him for advice, for small repairs, or just to see the mechanic who had once defied the galaxy to protect 2 little creatures. He greeted them all with the same patience and kindness, never boasting, never commanding, only teaching and helping. Mira would often fly over the yard, dipping low and teasing him with playful dives. Kess would follow behind, moving more gracefully, but still reminding him to take care of himself. Ravel laughed more than he had in years. The workshop, once lonely, was alive with small joy. Even the oldest, broken engines seemed to hum more warmly in their presence. One evening, Ravel looked up at the stars, reflecting on the past 5 years. The galaxy had tried to hunt, control, and command the dragons, but it had been a human, one small, ordinary human, who had taught a lesson greater than any fleet or law. He felt Mira curl against his shoulder and Kess nudge his arm. He smiled softly. "We did it," he said quietly. "We really did it." The dragons rumbled in agreement. They had taken their place in dragon society, yet they returned to him because of trust, love, and choice. In that moment, Ravel understood something profound. The galaxy would always remember, not the wars or the empires, but the acts of courage, compassion, and responsibility that changed everything quietly without fire or blood. Ravel Thorn, the mechanic at the edge of human space, had done something greater than conquest. He had reshaped the rules of the galaxy, not with weapons, but with small acts of care, with patience, and with unwavering loyalty. And in the quiet of his workshop, with Kess and Mira beside him, he felt something he had never known before. The deep, unshakable peace of knowing that even the smallest choice could echo across the stars. The galaxy would watch, the dragons would remember, and the humans who came after would learn that danger came not from power alone, but from responsibility and the courage to use it wisely. Ravel, a single human among stars and dragons, had taught the universe that lesson forever. And in the quiet workshop, filled with scraps, sparks, and soft rumbles of 2 dragons, life went on. Small, ordinary, and yet extraordinary as the world slowly learned the true meaning of courage.